It's been over a week since I first stepped foot in that cave. I ain't the same man I was before I went in. Sometimes I sit for hours just looking at nothing, thinking about nothing. Like my mind is afraid of what's behind the curtain. I can't say I've relaxed since then, but I ain't had any nightmares. Before all this happened, I would have expected an experience like this would plague a man with terrible visions each night. Something that would wake him up out of bed, drenched in sweat and his heart pounding. Don't get me wrong, there are certainly nights I don't get any rest, more than not. But as I've come to learn it, there ain't any nightmares without the mare. It's how you know they're near. And that goes for everyone, not just the folks on the mountain. The Wendigo plays a different role. The Wendigo corrupts the human soul. You find yourself in a place where some of the worst sins you can imagine run rampant, then there's a good chance a Wendigo is nearby. You might smell the decay or feel the evil in the air. The mare and the Wendigo. A match made in hell. See, the mare don't typically go beyond nightmares. They make your soul tremble, and yeah, sometimes it's too much for a person's heart to handle. But they ain't possessing someone that ain't already deeply corrupted, which is what the Wendigo did to them prisoners. The Wendigo opens the door for the mare to enter. "Run," Liza said quietly as if it slipped out of her mouth. The Wendigo was moving towards us, her body twisting and jumping every which way as it popped and cracked back into place. We took off for the stairs, our dream catchers held in front of us. The prisoners stood wild-eyed and jittery, like a horde of zombies unable to move. Our feet hit the stone steps, and we hung our dream catchers back around our necks. We were taking 2 to 3 steps at a time, trying to get to the top as quickly as possible. Liza's age was a factor, slowing her down quite a bit. Wally ditched his rifle and had her get onto his back. He's strong and quick, and he could manage to carry her better than I'm sure I could. The prisoners were pursuing us, but they couldn't get close enough to do any harm while we had the dream catchers on us. But the roar of that Wendigo was growing closer, and she certainly could harm us. Something was hitting the walls heavily, shaking the stairway carved from the mountain itself. I turned to look real quick, and there she was. She was twisting and contorting around the bend, bones breaking and snapping back into place. Prisoners were crawling across her and below her, anywhere they could get through. Some of them would make it out in front of her and then immediately get trampled or swatted out of the way. I still had my rifle on me, and I turned and I fired, but it did nothing to slow her down. Wally was well in front of me, despite Liza being on his back. I could tell she wasn't the type that liked to be carried around, but she knew her limits. She had her head turned throughout, hollering at me to hurry up. At one point, the Wendigo swiped at me and nearly hit me with its arm-length fingers, and that gave me the extra boost of adrenaline I needed to catch up to Wally. I could see the exit up ahead. We were nearly there. The Wendigo was still behind us, sounding louder and angrier. We reached the door and spilled into the interior of the Mundy house. I ain't sure why I figured it would work, but I immediately jumped back up to seal the door shut. The Wendigo hit it like a speeding train, launching me backward and out one of the previously boarded up windows. The air left my lungs as I hit the ground outside. I laid out there dazed and struggling to breathe beneath the night sky. I'm sure I was hurting, but I didn't have time to acknowledge it. Wally and Liza were outside helping me to my feet. "Get up, Mason. We have to get to the truck," said Liza. "Where's the Wendigo?" "She's in the..." At that moment, the Wendigo came crashing through the decrepit old wall and launched herself at us. We ducked back down to the dirt and watched as she overshot us and tumbled down the backside of the mountain. "This ain't gonna slow her down for long. Let's go," said Liza. We ran back through the house. The prisoners were pouring out of the door but still stopping before they could touch us. We ran past Sarah's body and reached the front entrance and exited into the yard. The truck was still there, along with all the other dead Mundies. I tossed Wally my rifle and jumped behind the wheel. Liza got in next to me. The prisoners were pouring out of every opening of the house. I started the truck and spun the tires, kicking up dirt and rock, as I turned the truck around and started heading down the mountain. "Here she comes!" shouted Wally. I looked in the mirror and could see that the Wendigo had made it back up the mountain. "What do we do?" I asked Liza. "We need fire." "Why?" "The Wendigo is weak to fire." "What about the mare?" "Take out the Wendigo, and the prisoners will no longer be corrupted. They won't be suitable vessels for the mare." I rechecked the mirror. The Wendigo was fast, but my truck was a little bit faster. "Okay," I said. "When we get to the bottom of the mountain, you and Wally need to get out. We need the Wendigo to come after you." "Mason, what are you doing?" "I'm going to take the truck back up the mountain. I need you two to keep the Wendigo at the bottom." I skidded to a stop at the bottom and got out of the truck. The Wendigo was still a little ways off. "Wally, how much gas you got left in that jug?" Wally picked up the jug and shook it. "About a cup." "You still have those matches?" He nodded. I asked him to give me a couple of matches and then took off my jacket and handed it to him. "Wrap your tomahawk blade with this and pour some gas on it." He jumped out of the truck and did as I asked. "When that Wendigo is getting close, you light that up and keep her at bay." Wally nodded. I got back behind the wheel and spun the truck around. "And Wally," I said before leaving, "take care of my grandma." I smiled at the two of them and sped up the mountain. I'd only known them a day, but the way I saw it, they were the only kin I still had. The Wendigo was charging down the mountain as I was racing back up. The road ain't very wide, so I had to swerve into a yard to avoid her. She took a swipe at me and clipped the truck, causing the rear to swing out. I regained control and kept going. I could see in the mirror that she had noticed Wally and Liza at the bottom. She even appeared to hesitate at first, deciding which of us she wanted to go after. She turned and headed down the mountain. I didn't have much time. I sped up a little way and braked hard. I jumped out of the truck with the matches in my dad's old handkerchief. I opened the gas cap, got the cloth wet with some fuel, and stuck it in. I struck a match and lit the handkerchief. I quickly ran back to the truck and jumped in, and turned around down the mountain. I just started picking up some speed when the gas caught fire. The truck bed was quickly engulfed in flames. I accelerated some more and the engine caught fire. Flames were whipping the windshield. The dark smoke was thickening. I could barely see in front of me. There was a crackle and a small explosion as I lost the use of the gas pedal, but I'd already picked up momentum and was heading down the mountain fast. The heat from the fire was becoming unbearable. The smoke and fire flickered just enough that I could see I was almost at the bottom. Wally was swinging the makeshift torch back and forth, keeping the Wendigo from getting any closer to them. The horde of possessed prisoners was stampeding down the mountain behind me. I laid on the horn, now only about a second from the bottom. I opened the door and dived out, landing hard against the dirt road. The blazing Ford collided with the Wendigo right as she turned around. It knocked her down and rolled on top of her, covering her in flames. Her roar was loud and pained. It almost resembled the agonizing wail I'd heard from Sarah earlier. She was flailing around wildly, fire eating away at her pale flesh. Through the flames, I could see her large saucer eyes staring right at me. She was no longer screaming. She wasn't making any sound at all. She just looked at me, as if she'd see me again. I stared right back at her and watched the bitch die. Wally and Liza ran over to me. They tried to help me up, but I told them not to. I could feel I'd broken a few ribs, maybe some other stuff as well. "Look," Wally nodded. The prisoners were standing around, scattered and confused, like they'd just woken up from a bad dream. Against my better judgment, I went ahead and let Wally and Liza get me to my feet and limped over to the crowd. I was looking for the Keller boys. I hollered their names the best I could, but it hurt to speak, let alone yell. I was looking at the hundreds of gaunt, dirty faces. Grown men and women who had been inside the mountain since they were children. And then there were the ones who are still children, who had witnessed the worst horrors imaginable. I felt a hand on my shoulder and turned to look. It was my mom. I couldn't believe it. I grabbed her and hugged her tight. I couldn't speak. I thought I'd lost her, and there she was. She'd never even been touched by the Wendigo. And at our side stood the Keller boys. I guess the mountain is healed from its sickness now, but the scars remain. The folks that live out there did some awful things that they will have to live with. It ain't worth pretending anymore. So we left. Liza showed me a spot on her property where we could bury my dad. It's a nice spot beneath a maple tree. He'd like it. Mom and the Keller boys are with us at Liza's house. The boys don't yet understand that their parents willingly gave them up, and we don't have the heart to tell them. For now, they'll stay with us until we can get things sorted out. They ain't going back to them rotten parents of theirs, though. Mom says she's had enough of the mountains and has decided she wants to live somewhere flat, like Florida. I can't say I blame her. I told her most parents eventually end up in Florida anyways. Me, though? I think I'll stay here. I was sitting on the front porch, watching the sun go down, and Liza came out and joined me. "So, you've decided to stay," she said. "For now." "Well, I'm happy to hear that." I smiled. "Good. You know, Mason." Liza leaned towards me. If you're going to stay, Wally and I were thinking you could help us. With what? Liza leaned back in her chair again. There are others still out there. I know. Wendigo in just about every mountain and mare waiting to join them. Yeah, but the Wendigo aren't the only evil out there opening the doors for the mare. I nodded. Then what should we do? Liza looked over at me and smirked. Close the doors. Hi everyone. As we have wrapped up the kin for my channel, I wanted to take a moment to thank the wonderful author that crafted and created this tale of horror. Fisherman Tales has been able to portray such an exciting environment for this story, and with good reason. I've covered other stories from them as well, such as There's Something Wrong with the Deer, Stranded, and Motorhome, just to name a few. They are also quite active over on Reddit, producing many different stories, so if you enjoyed this work and would like to continue reading, head over to the description for this video as you'll be able to find a link to the original post as well as some other goodies. And also, as an added treat, I'm sure many of you as well as myself are quite sad that this is the end of the line for Mason here. However, don't be upset. Fisherman Tales has a continuation of the series on their subreddit that I will also post a link to, so feel free to continue checking in with that story as well as many of the other works they've produced. Again, thank you Fisherman Tales for allowing me to read such an interesting story on the channel, and I look forward to covering other series entries moving forward. This has been such a wonderful experience for myself as well as the community, I hope, so I look forward to the future with other stories that we cover. Thanks so much for taking the time to watch, and I will see you for the next tale. Take care, and stay safe.